Okay, so next we're going to talk about the idea of self-parenting in a very deeper look. We now know that we have an inner parent. Well, first of all, we know we have inner conversations that are occurring all the time inside our mind, and that one voice is the inner parent, which is the way that we were brought up by our outer parents or caretakers. And we also know that the other side of the inner conversation is the inner child. And that's the voice of who we were as a child, even though now we might be an adult. So, what is self-parenting? Self-parenting is the concept that we, inside our mind, are parenting our inner child in exactly the same way that our outer parents parented us. This is a very, very deep concept. So, once again, self-parenting is the way that we parent our inner child inside our mind, which is exactly the same way that our outer parents parented us when we were young. So, for some people, this might not be good news because they had harsh outer parenting and they were abused and neglected and treated in terrible ways. So now they're 20 years old, or 30 years old, or 40 years old, and they're still inside their mind. They're treating themselves, their inner child, exactly the same way that the parents parented them. Now, for other people, if you had positive outer parents, then you're just kind of going through life and you're in a mostly positive parenting your inner child, which is a good thing. So basically, if we take everybody and just kind of average it out, most people have probably pretty good parenting inside, but there are times when they have negative outer parenting. Negative self-parenting. So what self-parenting is, the reason it exists, is that we can change the way we are parenting our inner child. Even if we had a terrible set of outer parents or very harsh upbringing, we can learn to become positive as an inner parent. And if you think about it, probably most of us have some negative way that we treat our inner child, and we don't even really know it till we learn more about self-parenting. So, in general, the idea of self-parenting is every one of us in America, in China, in India, in Pakistan, and wherever you live, wherever you are, each person is parenting themselves inside their mind the way their parents parented them. And this is an unconscious thing. It's something we learn before we're even speaking. We learn how to be a parent because of the way we were parented. So it's so natural that it never even became something that people knew about. They just kind of grew up and went out into the world and did their life the way they thought they should. So, but what we now know is if we have negative self-parenting, it's because our inner parent is being a negative parent. So just like an outer parent, let's say you see an outer parent and an outer child, and the outer child goes, "Oh, I want this candy," and the parent goes, "No," smash, and hits the child and says, "Shut up and don't say anything and get in the car and we're going home now. You know, you're a bad child." Well, that's the kind of negative inner parent that we can have. So as most people, when they're self-parenting, they're unconscious of this process. They're just doing it automatically, and if you could print out the way their conversations were onto a computer screen, you would see a conversation, outer parent, outer child, exactly the same, except it's happening inside. So what we learn with self-parenting is you can become a positive inner parent. So the way we do this is just like if an outer parent, outer child came to a psychologist and said, we want to have a better relationship, what should we do? So what we say is you're going to now sit down with your inner child for half an hour every day as the inner parent, and you're going to sit down and say to your inner child, this is your 30 minutes. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to ask you questions. And whatever you say to me, I'm going to be positive. I'm going to have a positive reaction. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to put you down. I'm going to listen to what you say, and I'm going to say, thank you, inner child, for telling me that. So this is what we call the self-parenting exercises. When you get to that section of the book, it's chapter 9, what you're going to do, this is how you start changing the inner parent. Essentially, the inner child is a wonderful, beautiful self. It may have negative traits and qualities, but that's only because of the way it was treated. So when you start treating an inner child in the proper way, the inner child becomes natural and loving and caring and sharing again. But the person that's preventing that is the inner parent. So self-parenting is the idea that during this 30-minute session, you're going to be following a certain set of protocols called the 23 tips. And the 23 tips are the way that you are restricted as an inner as an inner parent to respond to how your inner child says things. So, for example, you might, when you read chapter 9, you'll see that one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to open the session, you're going to read the opening. And the opening essentially says, inner child, this is our half hour, and I'm going to be a good inner parent, and you're free to be whoever you want to be. So definitely read the opening out loud. Then you're going to say something like, inner child, how are you feeling today? And when you do that, you write out the question, and then you say it out loud, and then you stop speaking, and then the voice that you hear responding to your question is going to be your inner child. So I think I will do a special 23 tips video specifically on each of the tips, because each of these tips are important. But right now we're just kind of talking about the half-hour session in a general way. So during your half hour, you're going to say, inner child, how are you today? And it's going to say, I'm fine, everything's good, this is fine. And you're going to write that down as well. Then whatever your inner child says, you're going to say, thank you, inner child, for telling me that. And then you're going to go on to the next question. So these half-hour sessions are very important. If you don't do these half-hour sessions, you won't change your inner parent. Your inner parent is very solidly programmed inside your mind. It was there long before you became conscious of it. And even if you do meditation and psychology and all kinds of things, your inner parent is way deep in there. So what the self-parenting half hours do is they train your inner parent to be positive. And just like a therapist would be positive in an outer therapist-client relationship, the therapist might say, how are you today? And then you'll say, I'm this, I'm that, et cetera, et cetera. And then the therapist is going to say, okay, thank you for telling me that, and move on through the different things that you want to talk about. So it's very important to do these half-hour sessions. I do want to stress that without the half-hour sessions, there's not going to be a lot of changes. Just reading the book is nice because it explains things, and usually the inner child's pretty excited when you read the book because it kind of sees how things are going to work. But it's the half-hour sessions that will change you. So I do want to make that point that everything in self-parenting is based on the half-hour sessions. They're only 30 minutes. We do them right when we wake up in the morning. There's a reason for that, which is to kind of, if you do something right away every morning, that means it's important. So in this situation, when you do your half-hour session with your inner child, the first thing when you wake up, it tells your inner child that it's very important. And this is a big key to the half-hour session. Your inner child needs to feel validated and that it's important. And when you do this session first thing in the morning, that's the proof your inner child needs. If you just say, oh, inner child, you're important to me, and then you don't even do a half-hour session, then that tells the inner child you're just saying that. So I think I made my point here that the half-hour sessions are important.